So we move now to talk about critical minerals, which have moved from the margins of industrial policy to the center. What's at stake is not just simply access to lithium or rare minerals, but control over supply chains that will underpin the next era of energy and defense, advanced manufacturing, and technological power. This session brings together leaders working across some of the most consequential fronts in that race, from lithium innovation to large-scale resource development. Jim Caravalla is our moderator. Please welcome him to the stage as well with his panel.
Thank you very much. Welcome, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel here on critical minerals today. I'd like to introduce Emily, John, and Oliver from our critical mineral supply chain. So let's dive straight in, and we'll have some interesting discussions today. So I'm going to start off with Jonathan, if I may. We've got a hard reality of domestic supply chains. Tell me, what was the issues as you've been developing Thacker Pass? What are the production and supply chain challenges that you've had? And how has that developed? And where are the critical bottlenecks that you've seen today?
Well, outside of permitting, which is normal course, financing is very difficult in this industry, especially for minor metals, because it's very, very cyclical. Private investors don't like volatility, and then companies struggle, and actually what you get is undersupply, and it's because more volatility. Folks up here, we're not talking about copper, we're not talking about iron ore, we're not talking about oil. These are markets that are not very well understood, and I think as everybody knows, the processing is mainly done in China, not that the resources are in China. And hitting the windows is very, very key. In our case, we're very fortunate to have the US government as a big backstop, the largest ever critical minerals loan for $2.3 billion. That also attracted General Motors, who's invested nearly $1 billion in us as a joint venture partner, and on top of that, Orion Resource Finance. So that public-private capital partnership is actually what we are, but it was very, very important to have the government as part of our capital stack to attract that. That's probably the hardest thing, and we've been lucky versus some other companies is that the timing for what we've been doing is in the right windows. If you're not in the right window, there's no capital available, and you can have all the permits you want and so forth, but building these takes a long time and it's expensive. Our project is $3 billion to put this asset in place. It's world-class. It's the largest known and measured lithium deposit in the world. In northern Nevada, we have it here, and we have other minerals here, whether they be rare earths, whether they be titanium, whether they be samarium, antimony. They're very difficult to get financed if you don't play the market right, but also don't have the right sponsorship.
And I mean, that's interesting. I mean, you cite a number of other mineral groups and sectors. In that experience set, you mentioned capital stack. So between capital stack, ore body, offtake customers, government anchors, which would you say is most important for new sector entrants to try and mobilize to the same level that you have?
If you don't have money, you can't do anything. But what underlines that mostly as well, too, is the deposit itself has to be economically viable. I'm not asked about ESG here. As private investors, you're going to want a return on your investment. So the underlying economics has to be something that's going to be competitive. First, whether it be first quartile or first half, to be able to survive the marketplace. On top of that, you need to have capital, which if you're going to go get private capital, would be quite expensive, especially now with higher interest rates. But having someone like the government or somebody with a big balance sheet like GM or Orion, who has a long-term view, they're probably the leading resource private equity company in the world, work with the DFC. They have a 10-year view, and you need those markers because without the capital, you can't get started. And yes, we are in a race that we've been losing for a long time. So time is of the essence.
No, thank you, Jonathan. Oliver, jump to you. You're in a very different field of mineral harvesting and exploitation. It might be well said that for seabed mining, the regulatory environment is the big unknown in the frontier. What is the big signal that US government or another entity could give to enable the uncertainty to be overcome?
Well, I founded Impossible Metals 6 years ago to really unlock the critical minerals on the ocean. And I think that big signal actually has already happened. President Trump signed an executive order April last year about unleashing critical minerals from the ocean. And that has been a game changer. And so now I think there is a clear regulatory path, there is funding, there is just a real realization that we cannot outsource all of these minerals to Chinese control. We need to go to the ocean. And one of the things I'd like people to understand is that this is not dissimilar to offshore oil and gas. If you think about the 60s and 70s, it was almost all on land. But yet technology and innovation made it practical to go to the ocean. And now it's maybe a third of the whole market comes from offshore. Exactly the same dynamics are playing out in mining. And with new technology that we've invented here in America, we can do it with far less environmental impact. And that's really the focus of Impossible Metals.
And so now that you feel you've got that demand signal from the government, what's your next biggest challenge or bottleneck that you're looking to overcome?
Like all mining companies, it will be capital intense. We will need to build a fleet of our autonomous underwater robots, and that will ultimately, at scale, need billions of dollars. So unlocking that funding, I think in partnership with the government, is a good strategy, but we do need investors to come in and see that there is a huge opportunity here as we take control back from China.
Interesting. And now let me switch again to Emily. You founded and leading Pure Lithium, and this is not just another battery company, it's just not another technology company. You've actually managed to innovate and compress the entire supply chain of lithium battery development to an extraordinary minimum of a few days, as opposed to over a year. How is that feeding into the existing battery supply chain and industry? What impact could it have, and what are the bottlenecks to the opportunity?
Yeah, well, it's really fascinating technology. We combine lithium extraction, anode production, and battery production in one place. And for those of you who may not know this, half of your cell phone's battery is made of graphite, and 99% of it comes from China. But in 1977, the Nobel laureate who won the Nobel Prize for the lithium-ion battery invented a battery called lithium metal while working at ExxonMobil, of all places, that just used pure lithium on the anode. This battery has 10 times more capacity than our lithium-ion today. It's going to be the next generation battery. In our lifetime, we've had 2 batteries commercialized to gigawatt-hour scale, lead-acid and lithium-ion, and lithium metal is next. So going directly to metal and then making the battery really does eliminate the Chinese-based supply chain. And thankfully, we have companies like Lithium America who've worked so hard to supply lithium salts in the United States that we really can have a closed-loop US supply chain. So it's not just about getting all these materials, it's about using technologies that you can, resource materials that are local and bring them to market.
And, thank you, Emily. A question for all here. We're talking about either extraction, supply chain, batteries, and applications. In the industry, in the US, we're all recognizing this urgency and criticality of the mineral supply chain and our availability. What are the big issues that we may be missing? What else is needed for the US and Western allied countries to actually gain that whole supply chain sovereignty? What are the other gaps that are needed to be filled?
I can start. I think it's well documented that over the last 25 years, China's kind of taken control of the critical minerals supply chain. Not that the minerals were in China, it's just that they provided the funding in places like Africa and Indonesia, and then they very much focused on the processing. And what they have been doing recently is actually manipulating price. There's a very good congressional report on this where they will dump and they will subsidize, and it basically makes it very, very difficult to compete. And so I think what we need to do is invest in assets that are inherently low cost, because otherwise it's a race to who can subsidize more. And that is a difficult game to win. And so, in my view, we have to go for valuable resources that are very, very low cost so that we have some protection against the price manipulation from the Chinese Communist Party. And then we just need to invest. You know, we also need the permitting reform. You know, it cannot take 29 years to build and permit a mine into production in the US. We need to realize that, yes, we do need good environmental protections, but it can be done in a much faster pace, like countries like Australia and Canada.
Jonathan.
Pricing transparency is very key. Look, that very hearing I testified at with MP Materials, and there was found that there was dumping in the marketplace and price manipulation both for lithium and also for rare earths. It's one of the reasons why private capital hesitates, because you default to Chinese pricing as opposed to looking at what the actual fair pricing should be, because as you've said, 80% of the batteries come from China, more than 90% of the processing of rare earths and 75% of lithium and many other metals come from China. They resource it from offshore, Latin America, Africa, and so forth. And then they control the price because you control the supply and you control the demand at the same time. So the government's working on projects like Forge, which are very helpful in that. And you're already starting to see breaks with the Chinese now because, look, we're speaking here as a variety of different minerals. I'll speak for lithium, and what Emily's doing in batteries is super important. This isn't an EV game. This is our grid. Every data center needs power. Folks like Tesla and Caterpillar actually are working together because sometimes data centers need 2 gigawatts of power. You feed it through a battery. It's behind the grid. Right now, every battery, every gigawatt hour is about 900 tons of lithium. So our grid security actually is at risk here with important materials like this. So don't think this is a renewables game or whatever else. This is a keep the lights on game. Pricing transparency is key because what should happen is private capital wants to underwrite this. We're very fortunate the government here has a long-term view, kind of like the Chinese government in our case, to give us a 20-year loan at the 20-year bond, a U.S. Treasury bond with no spread. China's been doing this for decades. And we revert back to short-termism in our Western markets like we have, and we're left, as a previous with Mr. Trump Jr. up here earlier, we've ceded it to the Chinese. You could see it coming. Pricing transparency is key, but also private capital needs to come off the sidelines as well. What we do, you can't AI. Maybe the workers, but you're either going to dig it up or you're going to grow it. Everything in this room either came out of the ground, what you're eating was grown. It's an industry that's, you've seen the theme, heavy asset, low obsolescence. This kind of stuff you're going to need to go forward, no matter what happens with artificial intelligence.
Jonathan, well put. That was robustly framed. Which then, then back to you, Emily. Just with that framing, that sense of urgency, that criticality, and I sense from both Oliver and Jonathan, not necessarily frustration, but just a recognition that so much more needs to be done and a sense of urgency needs to be key in our minds. Pure lithium has got an extraordinary value proposition. I'm surprised that I'm not seeing a dozen pure lithium factories churning out batteries with your supply chain innovations when we hear so much about the critical mineral urgency, the national security imperatives, the geopolitical strategic weakness that we have in the United States and the West, because China has played a very good game over the last 25 years, a little bit with some own goals, I think. What more does pure lithium need so that by this time next year, I'm seeing a dozen factories breaking ground?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. And for pure lithium, we need to deploy our technology as fast as possible, and it's ready. We're scaling the technology right now and building a prototype line. But our batteries are used in everything from drones to data center and beyond. And why is this important? The US military, generally on a good day, has between 10 to 20 days of batteries stockpiled, and we buy them all from China. We all know that's a bad idea for a myriad of reasons, right? We need these batteries that are made in America where we can control the technology, we can control the supply chain, and we can deliver them to the military that needs them, deliver them for critical infrastructure like Jonathan was speaking about, data centers, backup power supply. it's really, really important. So we're working with the DOE, with our national laboratories, and with private capital to bring our batteries online as fast as possible. Right now, we actually have 2 megawatt hours of lithium metal stockpiled at Argonne National Laboratory, which is where the Manhattan Project that solved World War II happened. We're sitting there with our lithium, ready to make our batteries and deploy them.
Amazing. Looking forward to seeing this next year in place. You know, I think we've all heard a lot of metrics about where AI is going, where the agentic evolution of the use of LLMs and generative AI is taking us. I've seen metrics that we're going to need 2 to 3 orders of magnitude of power over the years to come to service the data center requirements for this new agentic workflow. This is not including robotic applications, and this isn't including the potential of quantum intelligent computing as that all emerges. And that's just on the AI side. As we move into the physical AI domain of robotics and automated systems, the need for electricity as our power source is going to emerge ever stronger. There is no uncertainty in this. What would you say in our closing couple of minutes here? What would you say would be the key metrics that we need to get across to the investing community that they should take on board when they're looking at the absolute benign harvesting methodology of impossible minerals, the growth curves and the scaling that you're doing with Lithium America, and the pure lithium, the innovation that you have on the battery side? What are the innovation metrics that they should really keep to heart that gives them the confidence to move forward?
So I can start. I mean, the market is just absolutely huge. You know, we're focused on 4 metals: nickel, cobalt, copper, and manganese. That was like a $500 billion TAM last year, and it's going to go to $1 trillion. So there's a huge amount of money to be made here. And, you know, these critical minerals are the foundation of civilization. You know, nothing exists without them. There's no technology, there's no energy, there's no infrastructure, there's no defense. These are absolutely essential for our way of life. And we cannot just outsource that. We've got to do it here in America. And that's what I think all of us here on the stage are focused on. And unfortunately, I think this administration is also very focused. So I'm actually very optimistic that we can build together the new critical mineral infrastructure built and operated here in America.
I think you hit the nail on the point with an electrified economy. Going forward, everything is going to require more and more electricity, whether it be data centers, quantum computing, which would be a whole bunch more with the cryogenic, like absolute 0 Kelvin type of approach that you have to have. You had mentioned robotics, even aerospace. All these things take critical minerals. They are minor markets, though. Think of minor metals as salt and pepper on your meal, not the mashed potatoes, but the salt and pepper. So they're often forgotten about, but they're just as important as the main commodities that you see today, which are hugely important as well, like copper. I think it was mentioned earlier in a previous panel. We have a transmission problem in this country, a huge one. I mean, PURPA deregulated that anyone can start up power plants around the country, but how do you get the power to another marketplace? Even the management of our grid, all this stuff is interconnected with magnets and copper and wires and all sorts of other things. What's often looked at is just the military, and the military is great to look at, but the volume, you have to look at it holistically when you look at your business cases. Like my son builds jets for Lockheed. F-22s, there's less than 200 of them. They have 1,000 pounds or so of rare earth metals, but we don't build 5 of those every single week. Every Dyson vacuum cleaner that you have in your house has a rare earth magnet in it. Your car locks. Everybody has a lithium battery in your car, whether you like it or not. Most of your cars are actually mild hybrids now. All this stuff is in your daily life every single day. Your phone's in your pocket. They have rare earths, they have lithium, they have all sorts of things, silica, you name it. It's oft forgotten about. And the other thing we can't have is NIMBYism. We live in a democracy. If 9 people like something and 1 person doesn't, I'll go back to permit. I have no qualms about permitting in the United States. We went through it, but it took 4 years. The project that we have now that's actively in construction and will start up next year has taken 19 years to get here. 19 years.
Very good.
Wow.
Emmeline, last 30 seconds, quick wrap up.
I mean, I think what everyone here is doing on this panel is excruciatingly important, and we need to learn from each other, accelerate, and don't think of batteries and these materials as any kind of greenwashing or woke. We need these batteries to power society. We need copper for transmission. We need all of these minerals. And as my dear anchor investor, the mining entrepreneur Robert Friedland likes to say, everything that you see is either grown or mined, right? So we cannot be afraid of mining, we can't be afraid of minerals, and we can't be afraid of hard tech. We need to just make it our own and be leaders in this
Very
space.
good. Very good. Thank you very much, panel. Thank you for your attention. So you heard it. If you want to preserve our way of life,
Okay.
let's go. Thank you.
A big thank you to our panelists. So our next conversation